Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Jamie Hughes Show. My name as always is Jamie Hughes and today I'm going to be running down my 10 favourite movies of 2018. Now obviously these are going to be movies that I have seen, so if there's some that I'm missing on this list that aren't on your list, then let me know down in the comments below what your favourite movies of 2018 were. So without further ado, let's jump on into it, and in at number 10 it is Love, Simon. Love, Simon is number 10 on this list because what a genuinely lovely surprise this film was. It was so warm, it had a lot of heart, and yes, it was maybe a little bit over the top with the sweet moments in places, but I absolutely adored this movie. It was just genuinely so nice to see like an LGBTQ film being released in the mainstream and being so well received, and it just filled me with absolute joy, this movie. As I say, it's just so warm, it's got a real charm to it, and yeah, how could I not include it on my top 10 list? So that is why Love, Simon is your number 10 this year. And in at number 9, it is Halloween 2018. What can I say? It's Halloween. I absolutely adored this movie. I adore the original, and I really enjoyed what they did with the sequel here. Did they play a little bit on nostalgia? I think they did, but to be honest with you, I didn't really care. I loved the whole Laurie and Michael story being continued 40 years later. I loved that we got these little, not plot twists, but kind of story twists and story reversals where you didn't really know who was being hunted and who was the hunter at moments with that Laurie and Michael story. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. I had goosebumps so many times throughout this movie, and that is why it is my number 9 this year. And in at number 8, it is Bohemian Rhapsody. So Bohemian Rhapsody may be a little bit of a surprise for some people on this list, but I really enjoyed this movie. I really loved Rami Malek's performance. He was so captivating as Freddie Mercury. I think I mentioned it in my review, but I just got lost in some of the scenes he was in because I was just so focused on him. And yeah, maybe this movie isn't the best, but for me, the reason why this cemented itself as one of my favourites of the year is obviously because of kind of the last half an hour of this movie where we get the recreation of that Live Aid sequence. It was absolutely incredible. I was just genuinely overwhelmed watching it, and if nothing else, this movie made me go and listen to Queen for like 3 weeks solid. It genuinely stuck with me. In at number 7 is one of the most divisive movies of the year, and that is Hereditary. I think this was such a Marmite movie for so many people. Now obviously I'm in the camp of I enjoyed this movie. It's on my top 10 list of the year. I do think that this movie isn't necessarily an out-and-out horror as it was billed. I think this is more of a drama, but what a well-crafted story this movie was. As I say, I do think it was more of a drama, but what a real dramatic story this was. It kept you captivated throughout, and then you had those horror elements into it as well. And I thought that Ari Aster, when he got the horror like right, it was so good. There are some genuinely terrifying moments in Hereditary, and yeah, I absolutely loved it. I love Toni Collette's performance. I really hope that she is going to get nominated for an Oscar this year because she was brilliant. But yeah, like it's one of those movies you either love it or you hate it, but I genuinely loved Hereditary. So in at number 6, it was a little bit of a toss-up for me, and I really wanted both of these movies to be on this list, so I've kind of combined them together. They're not really kind of have any kind of similarity, I don't think, other than that both based in the 60s, I guess, but that is First Man and Green Book. I thought both of these movies were exceptional. Like, a First Man just left me totally overwhelmed. I think, again, why this movie had to be on my list was more for one specific scene. Now, the rest of this movie is great. I thought it told the Neil Armstrong story very well. But again, that sequence where Neil and the crew go up on the spaceship, and from that launch sequence onwards, I was, again, as I mentioned before. I was just totally overwhelmed by this movie. I just remember sitting in the cinema and I could just feel like my whole body shaking as the rocket took off. And again, it had to go on this list because it had such an impact on me. And then to go to Green Book, it was just a genuine lovely surprise to see this movie. I actually saw this movie, it was a secret screening, so I didn't know what the movie was going to be. It happened to be Green Book, and it just took me by surprise just what a genuinely lovely film this is. I thought Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali had absolutely electric chemistry, and yeah, I was just totally hooked within the first 10 minutes of this movie. I think it's just a great story, and I absolutely loved both of these movies and just had to include them. In at number 5, She's Off the Deep End. I'm about to dive in. We're in the shallows now, and we're now up to number 5, which is A Star Is Born. I don't know if I can say anything that hasn't already been said about A Star Is Born. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's an incredible directional debut by Bradley Cooper, also a brilliant performance by him. It's an exceptional, just mind-blowingly amazing, I suppose it's not an actorial debut for Lady Gaga, but she really stepped up to the plate here and more than carried her own in this movie. I really wanted to get an Oscar for this guy. I think she was that good. But yeah, A Star Is Born, again, is just one of those movies that stuck with me for so long. I think the harrowing kind of final act in this movie didn't really have that much of a profound effect on me when I first saw it. Like, don't get me wrong, it was really sad, but it really took a while for it to sink in what had happened with this film. It took me a few days to really process what went on, and again, I've talked about moments that stuck with me this year in movies as to why they've made my top 10 list. Now obviously A Star Is Born is an amazing movie, but one of those standout moments for me is where Lady Gaga performs Shallow for the first time on stage with Bradley Cooper, and like my whole body like just tightened up and condensed. I felt anxious for her, and again, as I say, it's just an exceptional movie. In at number 4, it had to be here. It is Avengers Infinity War. Now, what an amazing movie this is. 10 years in the making, 20 odd films of storytelling, all culminating in this huge event. And I mentioned this in my review of this movie as well, is that this wasn't just a film, this was an event, and it couldn't have been executed any better. You had that just harrowing ending where people were just completely dumbfounded by what happened. We had the redemption of the character Thor, again talking about movie moments when he nobs in to Wakanda with Stormbreaker and the Avengers music hits. Oh, goosebumps ever. I've got goosebumps now talking about it. It's one of those movies that your mind is blown by it, but you just can't help but be just so engrossed. And yeah, I don't even know where I'm going with this point. I just loved Avengers Infinity War. What an incredible piece of storytelling it was, and I absolutely loved it. Now, before I jump in to my top 3, I do have some honourable mentions that were really so close to getting onto this list, but I just couldn't find a place for them, so I want to include them in their own little mini list. I think there's 5 or 6 films on it, just of honourable mentions of movies I loved this year but just missed out on that top 10 spot. So first up we have The Mercy, which is one of the most genuinely depressing films I've ever seen, but what a powerful and impactful movie this was. One of Colin Firth's best performances I think I've ever seen of his. I think it's my favourite. I think it beats The King's Speech. Just a really great film. Next up, we have Black Panther, and I have so much to thank Black Panther for. It was a real shame not adding it to this top 10 list, but for me, this was the Marvel movie that got me back in to Marvel movies. It was the first one I'd seen in quite a while, and it just made me fall in love with Marvel once again. So I have a lot to thank Black Panther for, but again, it just missed out on that top 10 spot. Next up, we have Game Night, which was one of the most fun and genuinely well put together comedies I've seen in years. It was a real surprise. And yeah, once again, I just love this movie, but I just couldn't find a place for it on my top 10 list. Next up, we have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was incredible. And it's a shame I haven't got it on this list, but for me, it lacked a little bit of a punch, and I've mentioned this in my review of it as well. And that wasn't because there was anything really wrong with this film, it's that I'm just not up on Spider-Man kind of... My Spider-Man knowledge isn't really there. I'm not up on Spider-Man lore, so I felt like I didn't enjoy it as much as I could, but it's still an absolutely incredible movie. I'm not putting it down in any way, shape or form. I think the animation is the best we've seen this year without a doubt. Yeah, I just couldn't really find a place for it in my heart of hearts on my top 10 list. So those are my honourable mentions, and now let's move on to my top 3 favourite movies of the year. And in at number 3, it is A Quiet Place. What a heartbreaking, heartfelt, original, terrifying movie this was. Now, I've talked a lot about movie moments in this video, moments why I loved films so much this year. And for me, it was one of the favourite moments I've experienced in the cinema for A Quiet Place. And that is that moment where Emily Blunt is walking down the stairs and she stands on the nail, and I've never experienced anything like this in the cinema before. The whole cinema like winced in agony and like despair for her, because we knew she couldn't scream because she was gonna die, and the whole cinema was just on tenterhooks, were just in sheer like panic and anxiety and agony for this character. And that is what this movie really did so well, is that it made you care about the characters from the off. I'm a big fan of movies that blend genres together, and essentially what A Quiet Place is a family drama just peppered and sprinkled with absolute terrifying horror as well. And it was just an original story that I totally fell in love with, and yeah, I absolutely loved A Quiet Place. In at number 2, carrying on that theme of horrors that make you think, we have Ghost Stories. Now, like this for so long this year, this was my favourite movie of the year. I absolutely loved it. I loved what Andy Nyman did. This movie is based on a stage play, and it is essentially a horror anthology movie, but it's all linked to this one central character. A lot of you guys may not have heard of this movie, and I really suggest you go and check it out, because as I say, I really love that we had these 3 kind of anthology stories, but they all linked back to this one specific guy. And again, it was all different blends of horror as well. So you had the stereotypical haunting, you had like psychological horror in there as well, and it all just worked so well to culminate in this really like just mind-bending story. But what this movie did so well, and it's what so many British horrors do, is that it really made you think, and it really had almost a real message and a real punch of kind of reality at the end of this movie. And I absolutely adore this film, and I just wish, for those of you that haven't seen this movie, just go out and see it, because it is absolutely phenomenal, and it would have been my number 1 if it wasn't for this movie coming up. And my favourite movie of the year was Searching. What an incredible movie this is. As I've mentioned, and what has made my heart fill with joy this year is that my top 3 movies of the year have all been original stories, have all been original movies, and I don't think you could get any more original than Searching. I love the concept of this movie. Now, don't get me wrong, I was a little bit skeptical when it first started, but I was so hooked instantly. I instantly cared about these characters, and I did mention this in my review of this movie, and that is that I think this has the most depressing opening of a movie ever. I think it knocks out up for me. But yeah, I love Searching. I love the whole concept of it. I love that we only got to see what the main character was seeing. We got incredible career-defining performances from John Cho and Deborah Messing. I just love this movie. For a movie that is essentially an hour and a half just looking at a computer screen, I was on the edge of my seat. It had twists, it had turns, it just had everything that I love about a movie. And I just again remember feeling physically exhausted after seeing this movie, because so much had gone on. It had taken me through every emotion possible, and I absolutely loved it. And that is why Searching is my favourite movie of 2019. 2018. So those are my 10 favourite movies of 2018. Let me know what you thought of my list, and let me know your personal top 10 movies of the year, as always, down in those comments below. Thank you so much for all your support for the Jamie Hughes Show this year. I will see you next year. Have a good one. I'll see you then. Ta-ra.